Sam Seder debated a bunch of people on a show called Jubilee, a bunch of conservatives, and it got wild. Oh my God. This girl here literally advocated for Nazi ideology. She said xenophobic nationalism is a good thing. That is literally just Nazi ideology. I want to give this a listen, see what they had to say to each other.
Like, what's the problem with xenophobic nationalism? Don't you think that's better for Americans in general? Like,
I'm so, like, how did she come to that conclusion? Oh my God.
Xenophobic nationalism is better.
We should have a coherent culture. Everyone should be a part of the same culture.
Which, do you get to choose what the culture is?
We already have a dominant culture.
I mean, look, I got to be honest with you. Like, you and I have a fundamental disagreement. We will never see eye to eye on this. Hi, I'm Sam Seder, host of the Majority Report. And today I am surrounded by 20 conservatives.
Like I said, some of these people are just vile, like full-blown Nazi ideology, just disgusting.
My first claim is Trump's attack on DEI hides his real goal, which is to give corporations more power.
All right.
How you doing?
Sorry, Sam.
No worries.
All right.
I think most of these people are famous Republican influencers, like or semi-famous. There's at least one guy from Elijah Schaffer's network, quote unquote. Elijah Schaffer is famously racist, self-avowed racist. He says, "I am a racist, and I think more people should be racist." This is like really psychotic stuff.
I think I have a slight issue with the back end of the premise. I guess Trump's attacks on DEI being a real goal to, give corporations more power. I'd rather center the conversation around the democratic, especially as conservatives, the issues that people have.
Okay, well, first of all, get rid of the pedo stash, I'm begging you. Second, there was a claim presented. You're here to debate that claim, not to make up some other shit. But all right, whatever. By the way, the algorithm is hitting me hard right now, completely ignoring me. So I'd appreciate if you watched to the end of the video. Having increased watch time as a percentage and a raw number is what pushes the video further. Also check out my books, owenmorgan.com. All right, back to the video.
Have with DEI and why I believe Trump would, want to support the issues.
Okay, so he's going to argue that DEI or trying to destroy DEI is a good thing then, right? Is what he's saying?
That people are voting for him.
I mean, I'm talking about his whole attack on DEI. It's actually DEIA, right? You know that.
Right.
In government agencies. The
He didn't know that. There's no way.
A being for accessibility.
Right. Yeah, and I think the attack on DEI isn't an attack on people's protections. It's on the other end of the spectrum, right? Wanting to end DEI doesn't want to end protections for someone being disabled, someone being.
It literally does. Yes, that is exactly literally what is happening.
I
have that mustache frowny face. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Taiwan Tim. Not a fan of that style for some reason. I don't know. Maybe it's because I grew up Jehovah's Witness, and that's all the facial hair Jehovah's Witnesses are allowed to have right there. Or up until recently. Now they can have beards. And that's just too much for me now. Having grown up and seeing that, too much. Can't do it.
DEI doesn't want to end protections for someone being disabled, someone being, inaccessible to get into a job. It rather wants to de-incentivize corporations to push them to hire these people on unfair bases.
Yeah, I think the word is disincentivize, but okay.
Right.
Okay, but DEIA is not about quotas or anything like that. It is about protections for people within these organizations, or to make sure that you have different communities that have the opportunity to apply to these things.
Right.
So
yeah, I'll tell you what DEI is really doing. There's a disproportionate number of white people in positions of power, white men in not just positions of power, but like across the job market. Disproportionate as in it doesn't match up with the number of qualified candidates in society, including in the black community, the Hispanic community, the white community. So basically what I'm saying is white people have an unfair advantage, particularly white men, especially if you have a white sounding name like John or Jeff or something. You have a disproportionate advantage that other people from other demographics, backgrounds, experiences, or whatever do not have. And DEI is a kind of like a method of filtering that out and making sure that everybody has a fair shot and that white people are not getting an unfair advantage. That's what DEI is for. Now, the way that Trump and his ilk are framing everything is as though white people are being disfavored for black people. They're taking less qualified candidates because they want to hire black people. Like black people are just like inherently less qualified. When in reality, companies are taking less qualified candidates right now. You're taking less qualified white candidates. And DEI is a method of ensuring that everybody is getting a fair shot at it, broadening the job search market and everything else to make sure that the job offers and the job whatevers were all made available to like other communities other than just in white communities and white communities alone.
It can mean within government agencies, it means things like let's pay interns so that not only wealthy people can have their kids do internships in these agencies.
Right.
Or let's put out notices around different parts of town,
Sure.
metaphorically speaking, so that people know this job exists.
Right. This is where it begins, but this isn't the ultimate goal that conservatives have an issue with.
Okay, ultimate goal? We're talking about an ultimate goal? Well, what do you have a problem with then that you think is happening? You're attacking DEI, but completely ignoring the good parts of it. Sam just described, and I described, what DEI is and why it's good and why people would want it. And this dude is saying, well, you know, we're not talking about that part. We want to get rid of all of it, of course, but that's not the part that we're talking about specifically here. Come on.
Conservatives don't have an issue with trying to spread job applications to poorer communities.
Well, then why rescind DEIA requirements in government agencies?
Because the problem with DEIA is there may not be like perceived actual number quotas, but that's what it devolves into, and especially with corporations.
There are not number quotas. There cannot legally be number quotas. That is against the law, to my knowledge. So it doesn't devolve into that. It just broadens access to other qualified candidates other than just the white ones. That's it. Oh, yeah, by the way, and he doesn't have any evidence of what he's saying here either.
Actual number quotas, but that's what it devolves into, and especially with corporations.
Do you have evidence of that?
I mean, sure, we can look at corporations that are government agencies that are hiring people on not true, proper bases. We can even look at. Even look at.
Okay, I'm not asking if we can look at things. Do you have the evidence or not? And the answer is, of course, no. Can you cite a study? Can you cite anything for me at all? Because this isn't happening. This is like when in World War II, Hitler was, of course, fear-mongering about immigrants. That was his main target, immigrants. They're trying to take everything over. Immigrants in his mind at the time were the Jews. So he was complaining about, you know, these immigrants, the Jews, trying to poison the minds and the blood of honest, innocent Aryan people, taking their jobs and taking their money and taking control of like the levers of power in the country and all this other stupid nonsense. And he would claim that he would come up with absolutely ridiculous claims for this stuff. Like Hitler said, Jews have converted to Christianity, some of them, with the express intent to modify the way that people practice their religion, to kind of alter the way Christianity operates. All the way down to like church organists, musicians. They've even like started writing music that gives a certain type of impression. And they're doing this intentionally, specifically in subtle ways that are really hard to tell. Because if it were more overt, you would see it right away and you wouldn't allow that to happen or whatever, right? Well, do you want to know how many church organists there were that were Jewish converts in Germany? 18,000 churches or so. Say 18,000 organists, give or take one or two, right? Out of 18,000 church musicians, there were 2 Jewish converts converted to Christianity, 2. This is a non-existent problem, is my point here. this problem of like the trans community, like grooming children, quote unquote, or whatever. It's non-existent. It's trash. It's fictitious. It has always been fictitious. This whole DEI is devolving into like white people are losing their opportunities. No, they aren't. It's fictitious nonsense. Always was. And it's based on the same reasoning that Hitler used to demonize the immigrants of that time and place, too. Though the Jews were not immigrants at that time. They had lived there for hundreds of years, but you get the idea.
Any evidence that that's happening?
Yeah, even the DNC's nomination of Kamala as president this year, there was no reason to nominate.
I mean, it's Kamala.
Kamala as she wasn't democratically selected. She wasn't. She didn't go through.
Whoa. Okay. So he's saying he sees one person that is not white and male and uses that one non-white person as evidence that DEI is out of control and taking qualified white people out of the pool. What? Are you shitting me with this right now? What am I supposed to even say to this? How can somebody be so gone, just lost, like their head is gone?
Single primary, none of these things.
So you're saying that Kamala was the vice president of the United States after the president drops out 2 months before the convention. You think that's a DEI?
She wasn't
higher?
Every presidential nominee is democratically selected to be the
Oh my God, this is just Republican propaganda, what he's repeating right now. There was nothing weird or questionable or odd or whatever about how any of this played out. It's just propagandistic trash.
Nominee for that party, except
there were
for
not
Kamala
even
Harris.
Primaries prior to 1972.
Well, sure, but this isn't before 1972.
Well, I understand, but what did you think you were going to run primaries in those 2 months?
Well, sure,
I mean, Joe Biden should have dropped out
even
3 years
even
ago,
before,
as far as I'm concerned.
Well, sure, but even before, when Kamala was running in primaries, she wasn't the next man up. None of this. She wasn't the next person.
She was the vice president,
right? Of course, but she wasn't in primaries.
Detail. But
right,
listen,
well,
aside from, I would have might have wanted a different candidate as well. But that has nothing to do with Trump rescinding orders that basically say you need to search for a wide range of candidates, not necessarily give any different benefits, but you need to make sure different communities have access to the awareness of this job. You need in your office accessibility for people who have physical handicaps.
Sure.
If you have folks who identify as as trans, you need to make it at least hospitable and not. This is all non-discriminatory stuff.
Yeah, it isn't about like picking people for jobs or whatever because though they're inferior, though they're less qualified. It's not even just about that. It's about making sure that they're not discriminated against in the workplace. Plain and simple, and that white people are not getting an unfair advantage, which they are right now.
That's what this is all about.
But you're cherry picking the portions of DEI that even conservatives don't have issue.
They don't really. Okay, this is the first time hearing of it because that's all I hear about is how these are DEI hires. They're not worthy of working at these positions or whatever because they're DEI hires. Like all I hear from right-wing people is how DEI needs to go completely. It should be right out the window, all of it, everything about it. It's all toxic and damaging and hurting white people. It's persecution of white people. God, this is a reach, really.
Conservatives don't have issues with making workplaces.
The whole DEI apparatus within our government was a function of doing exactly what I said, had nothing to do with quotas.
It is unfortunate that those things get taken out, and there might not have been specific.
What was taken out, and what else is there about DEI? Yeah.
What is it trying to take out?
It's trying to take out people getting jobs that don't deserve those jobs. People getting pushed into.
Again, that's not happening. DEI programs only try to spread the word that there is a job posting to other communities so that other communities have a fair shot at applying for the job and everything else, just like every other group of people. It's just making sure white people are not being given an unfair advantage. That's it.
Positions, they have no qualification.
There is no evidence of what you just said happening in these government agencies.
That's not true at all. I mean, we're not
Well, give it to us then. Give it to us. You're just making shit up right now. This is just fictitious.
allowed to sit here and have notes and numbers to pull up for you. You can't
Give me one example.
You can't ask me to pull up numbers when I'm not.
I'm not asking for numbers, like Sam said. One example. Anything. Literally one.
I'm not able to sit here and look on a computer for you, but these are the
How would
problems
you-
that conservatives.
Sorry, you've been voted out. Please return to your
Thank you,
seat.
Sam.
Thanks, man. See ya.
Okay, so I think the roots issue with DEI isn't what the previous gentleman was trying to point. Conservatives aren't necessarily have issues with those things like accessibility to people who might need help. The issue is, and I kind of referred to this before, when you have agencies and systems, what tends to happen when you have government overreach, big government, is that agencies and systems get abused. And I think unequivocally.
Okay, well, I'll take any evidence of it. Any. Literally any. There's zero evidence of what he's saying right now. That there's no evidence of, certainly not systemic waste, fraud, and abuse in the government. Like Elon Musk and Trump, by the time that this released, when this released, I think it released in March, early March. When this released, Musk and Trump had basically been dismantling the government for like the leading for the previous 2 months, just destroying it, tearing it apart. And they didn't provide a lick of evidence of waste, fraud, or abuse. Zero, none. There's no evidence of it. So, I don't want to hear it. I think it's pretty obvious it was just trash. It was all made up all along.
Quickly, DEI was heavily abused in practice. It was great in theory. It's idealistic, which is sure is fine, that a lot of people can get behind, but it was abused in a lot of ways. When you have actors, like we're in California right now, when you have actors, white male actors who are being told, we do not want white men, we're not gonna cast any white men, we only want this particular kind of.
Okay, I don't know what you're talking about, but acting is different. Like there are some what's the word I'm looking for? Some like fields, some companies or whatever that are allowed to discriminate for certain reasons. Like if you need an actor that is black for some reason, you can do that. Additionally, Christian companies or let me rephrase. Christian nonprofits are allowed to discriminate against non-Christians. They are not required to hire non-Christians to work there. So he's picked like one specific field, one specific example that only applies to this very specific thing.
We're not going to cast any white men. We only want this particular kind of gender, race, right? That is an abuse of a system.
No, it isn't. That is an exception within a system that should exist. Actors should be allowed, or let me rephrase, production should be allowed to pick actors that are appropriate for their roles without worry. Like you're making a movie about a little kid, you can't hire an adult to do that role. That's just how it works. It's how it's always worked. I actually talked to my wife about this because she was telling me about exceptions to anti-discrimination laws. And that one thing that he just mentioned is one of those exceptions.
It's no longer fair, but more about just perpetuating one aspect of, visual compelling aspects. Because at the end of the day, what's going to happen is companies are going to say, well, we want to look the most diverse.
Okay, well,
and what that is it's moral grandstanding. It's that because we have more black women, we sell better soda, like that.
I mean, moral grandstand. Look, this is a choice that a company is making to ensure that everybody feels represented and feels that it's fair. And the anti-discrimination laws protect white people too. They guarantee that white people are not being discriminated against in business. Everybody's protected by the anti-discrimination laws. And it's just weird to me that Republicans zero in on the false notion that white people are being discriminated against. So do you care about discrimination or not? Do you think that, like, caring about race is important, or do you think that we shouldn't care about race at all? Like, what?
Gotcha.
That is not.
Well, that's getting a little far afield from what Trump's DEI orders are. But I can tell you, as somebody who was a sitcom actor in the 90s, I would walk into a room and everybody I would see would look like me.
Oh, yeah. You know what? That's a good point. He's uniquely qualified to answer this question as a sitcom actor. But again, that is an exception to the rule, as production companies are allowed to hire whoever they want, pretty much.
And I was doing a second position, which doesn't even exist anymore, where you do 2 pilots a year. And I was looking around basically every part of television when I was a kid. I was centered in some fashion. It was either this is about my mother, or this is about my father, or someone like me was centered. So, we can argue as to whether or not Hollywood is overcorrected in some fashion. But on a governmental level, the DEIA directives that agencies were following for the past 4 years, there's nothing, I don't know what you mean by abuse on it, but there is no evidence that it was an affirmative action program in those instances. It was about anti-discrimination. You cannot discriminate against these people, and you want to open up opportunities for a broad swath of people. Again, the internship is like one of the most material things that exist there, where the idea that you need to pay interns. And that's important because you want low-income people to have the same sort of like opportunities to see these things as wealthy people. My kids can maybe afford to do an internship for the summer instead of going to get a job.
I think what's happening is we're talking about 2 different things.
But I'm talking about Trump's DEIA rescission.
They're not talking about 2 different things. Sam is talking about the thing that the guy brought up. This guy just doesn't like what he had to say because he realizes that Sam was correct. You can't just say, oh, well, that's different. You can't just say that when you don't like the answer you get.
Is a way of basically driving people out of these agencies, making it
you're saying Trump specifically, and I understand why you're saying Trump, but I think the American people as a whole have kind of, and I won't say whole because obviously it's not 100%, but a majority of the American people have kind of rejected DEI because, again,
I don't think a majority of Americans know what DEIA is.
That may be the case, but again, my point is we're talking about abuse of a system. What you're talking about is not necessarily what was happening. What people were seeing were, hey, because you're white, you can't do this. And liberals like to do this thing where they create systems, and then they created the whole idea of woke, and then they backed away, and then conservatives say woke, and then they're like,
okay, white people didn't quote unquote create this whole idea of woke or whatever. Conservatives started screaming about woke, quote unquote. Like, what even is that? It's a nebulous word that conservatives are like obsessed with using right now. And famously, people can't even define what woke is. This woman that you see on screen here, she wrote a book about quote unquote woke. Stolen Youth is the name of it. And basically the whole book was about how, wokeism has gone too far and it's destroying it. Blah, blah, blah. So she goes on air to talk about her book.
Of Americans consider themselves very liberal, and probably fewer of them consider themselves to be woke. And so, when we talk about traditional,
what does that mean to you? Would you mind defining woke? Because it's come up a couple times, and I just want to make sure we're on the same page.
So, woke is sort of the idea that
literally wrote a book about how wokeism has gone too far. Cannot define it.
Woke is sort of the idea that
boy, is this awkward.
This is going to be one of those moments that goes viral.
Yeah, a little bit. Yep, it is. It is one of those moments. Oops. Just picked a whole bouquet of oopsie daisies on that one, didn't she?
Woke is something that's very hard to define, and we've spent an entire chapter defining it.
Okay, can you break it down in like a sentence for me, please? Anything?
Woke is something that's very hard to define, and we've spent an entire chapter defining it. It is sort of the understanding that we need to totally reimagine and redo society in order to create hierarchies of oppression. It's hard to explain in a 15-second soundbite.
Oh my God, dude. Look, you have all the time in the world. You don't have to spend 15 seconds doing it. You can spend 30 minutes doing it if you would like. You literally wrote a book about how wokeism has gone too far. You can't even define it. Really. Oh my God, I love that. I love that so much. I forgot about that clip. I got to download this later.
Yeah, look, your time.
You can take your time, she says. Oh my God. Anyway, yeah, okay. The point is that nobody knows what wokeism is, quote unquote, because it's just a nebulous enemy that like conservatives have chosen to demonize at this moment. Like before wokeism, quote unquote, it was CRT, critical race theory. Critical race or critical theory is just a framework through which to analyze the law. Like lawyers have critical theory classes to try to understand different perspectives. My wife took critical theory classes, a number of different critical theory, critical feminist theory, critical race theory. And the reason lawyers take those classes is because they're required to argue the devil's advocate side frequently. Like that's their whole job, to argue devil's advocate, to be the devil's advocate. Your job is to advocate vociferously, if you will, for your client, no matter what, no matter what's happening, no matter what they did or who they are or whatever. You have a legal requirement to argue for your client. So taking classes that help you see things from different perspectives is valuable. Those are critical theory classes in law school. But these poor dumb fools wouldn't stop talking about critical race theory and how it's being taught in our elementary schools. Anyway, wokeism is the new critical race theory, which itself was a replacement for something else. What was the other thing? I'm trying to remember what it was before critical race theory, CRT. It's just so f***ing stupid. It is so f***ing stupid and embarrassing and painful and sad.
And then they created the whole idea of woke, and then they backed away, and then conservatives say woke, and then they're like, well, we don't know what woke is. They created DEI.
What is woke then? Define it for us. They created DEI. Oh yeah, you know what? I guess DEI is the new woke, and woke is the new CRT. In a big cycle of demonizing, things over and over and over again. It's so stupid.
Biden literally said Kamala Harris is being chosen because she is a black woman, and then all of a sudden...
No, he didn't. I don't think that happened. I'm trying to remember here. Anybody remember him saying that? I think he's probably talking about Ketanji Brown Jackson, not Kamala Harris. But, when did facts ever matter to these people? Biden said he was going to pick one of the qualified black women to be on the court. And the reason that he said that was because, to my knowledge, I don't think that there had ever been a black woman on the court before, on the Supreme Court, I mean. She was the first, Ketanji Brown Jackson, and it was a big deal. There have absolutely, for sure, most definitely been qualified black women who were perfectly qualified to be on the Supreme Court before, but they keep getting passed over. So Biden chose one of the, let me rephrase. So Biden chose a black woman who was qualified rather than a white man who was qualified.
He said Kamala Harris is being chosen because she is a black woman, and then all of a sudden...
Yeah, I think he's just misremembering things.
Democrats for the rest after that said that's not why she was chosen, even though Biden literally said that. And then we have this cognitive... Look at this
poor dumb fool in the background nodding his head like an idiot.
Why she was chosen, even though Biden literally said that. And then we have this cognitive dissonance as if we're not living in reality.
Biden wanted to make sure that there was that there was an opportunity for a black woman to be his vice president.
Yes, but so why did Democrats move away from that and say no, it wasn't because she was a black woman? So my point is that it's
not because she's a black woman.
But that's what they said.
Oh my God, dude.
Agree that it's not because she's a black woman, but that's what they said. Why did they say that?
Are you going to let this dude get a word in edgewise? You're just going to keep talking over him. God, this debate tactic pisses me off so much. I cannot stand it. It's like dirty and underhanded. You won't let somebody get a word in because the more somebody talks in a debate, the more they seem like they won. Whoever talks the most, people feel that person is the winner every time. That's just how debates work. And it is so incredibly frustrating to me to listen to these fools try to like use this scumbag debate tactic. It's just really annoying.
No, because there are plenty of black women, right? Like he could have picked anybody, but he picked specifically her.
Because she's qualified, of course. He picked specifically her because she's qualified. He didn't pick like some rando on the side of the street.
The idea that there wasn't a black woman who would have been qualified for that position.
No,
and I don't believe
saying.
that.
No, that's not what conservatives aren't saying, that there aren't, because again, even in the Republican Party right now and in Trump's cabinet, there are people of color that Democrats pretend don't exist, like J.D. Vance's wife, and
J.D. Vance's wife is not in the cabinet.
No, but if J.D. Vance was a Democrat, his wife would be lauded all over everything because of her color of her skin.
No, she wouldn't. What are you talking about?
I'm not here to defend the Democrats' choice on every policy, but there is one party in this country that is identitarian. There is one party that is represented and it is homogenous, and it is the Republican Party. 85% of Republicans are white. That's just the reality.
So does that mean that? So hold on. But here's the thing. You said even if let's just say, okay, that's true. 80% of Republicans are white. Does that mean that they're less moral? That they can't run an effective?
Yeah. What are you talking about? Where did any of this come from?
Government. What does race have to do? What does race have to do? Hold on. What does race?
Nothing. That's the thing. It has nothing to do with it. You're the one bringing it in here and saying that people are like less qualified because they're a different color or whatever.
Didn't have to say.
What does race have to do?
It's going to be a white male.
No.
Because they all knew it was going to.
No, this is the premise of DEI. What does race have to do with running an effective government? What does race have to do? If let's say DEI on
absolutely nothing. It has nothing to do with running a government effectively. Nobody is saying that. But what we are saying is that literally every single president in U.S. history ever has been a white man. What am I supposed to do with that?
On the micro level.
I will tell you right now.
DEI on the micro level at McDonald's.
I'll tell you.
Am I going to get better?
Oh my God, McDonald's would be amazing right now.
Nuggets.
I'll ask you a question.
If the cashier is black or white, what does that?
No, nobody cares. Nobody has any connection to this or whatever. I'm not the one that's zeroing in on race. I just want the country's administration to look a little bit more like the racial makeup. So we got, 15% black people in the country, right? I'd like to see 15% or so representation. If there is a district that is majority black, say 90% black, I don't think that a white person should necessarily be representing that district. Okay, this is driving me crazy. I think a black person should probably be representing that black community. You know why? Because at the end of the day, you can't understand what somebody goes through unless you've been through it too, in some cases. You just can't. I'm an ex-Jehovah's Witness. If you are not an ex-Jehovah's Witness, I can tell you about it. But you can't, fully connect with what it's like to be in that situation, walk into a Kingdom Hall and sit down, and all the people that you grew up with, the people who, when your parents were broke as dog shit, these people got together and bought you school supplies one year. They bought you your backpack for third grade. When you go in and sit down in that room, they all ignore you. They don't look at you. They believe that you are mentally diseased. I can explain that to you, but sitting in that room and experiencing it is a whole different thing. In the same way, somebody can explain to me that it's really hard to get an abortion. Even if you're pro-abortion, it's really hard to do that. There are a lot of emotions that go into it. It's challenging to get in there, just to get an appointment. It's challenging to go in, certainly alone and all that. You can explain that to me. But until you are sitting there in the doctor's office, you can't fully know what that shit is like. You can care about the issue. You can understand that it affects people a lot, but you can't know. I believe that people in government that represent us should know, should understand as much as possible, should be aware of the fact, at least be aware of the fact that Black families have a tradition dating back hundreds of years, certainly, of telling their children about how to handle police if they encounter them. I believe that a representative of an area should understand what those people are experiencing. If there is a majority Muslim region of the United States, a Muslim should be representing them. The Supreme Court has only represented white men, but almost exclusively. Some women, and I think one black guy. The Supreme Court should represent everybody. We should get people on there who are qualified from all different backgrounds because they add a unique perspective that others won't have. As much diversity as humanly possible would be ideal as long as they're qualified, and they are perfectly qualified. Everybody on there has been through law school, has served as a judge or whatever. I mean, there are some that are not perfectly qualified. Amy Coney Barrett is underqualified. She didn't spend almost any time at all on the bench or whatever, working as a judge or whatever it was. Gorsuch is qualified, to my knowledge. Kavanaugh is not qualified. John Roberts is qualified. Clarence Thomas, qualified. Alito, qualified. Ketanji Brown Jackson, Sotomayor, obviously, very qualified. I'm missing one. Who is the other left-leaning judge? There's a third. I think I've named all the justices except for that one. Anyway, they're all qualified except for a couple. And wouldn't you know it, the couple of people that are not qualified for that job are white. How about that? Alito and Thomas. I disagree about Alito and Thomas. I think when I say qualified, what I mean is they have served in the field for long enough that they understand, by and large, how the legal framework functions, basically, and how it should function. Like, you should have a certain amount of time on the bench if you're going to be a Supreme Court justice. You should have a certain amount of time litigating and whatever else. And I believe that, like, John Roberts, though he's a religious fanatic and unqualified ideologically, he is qualified on paper. His resume qualifies him. He knows what he's doing and he knows what he's talking about. And he knows how the whole thing functions, basically, is what I'm saying. Alito and Thomas know what they're saying and they know what they're doing and they are qualified to do their job. They're just f***ing psychotic is the problem.
Have to deal with anything.
I'll tell you what it, first of all, DEIA means that if you come into this agency or corporation, you're not going to be discriminated against because you don't look like everybody else or you don't have the same like physical abilities as everybody else, or you may require handles on the bathroom or whatever it is. That's what DEIA does. But does it make a government better if there's a broad representation of the people it's supposed to govern? Without a doubt. Without a doubt.
Correct me if I'm wrong, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong.
You just said that. Yes, you said we can correct you. Can we correct you if you're wrong? I was just asking because I wasn't sure if we could correct you if you're wrong.
Government better if there's a broad representation of the people it's supposed to govern? Without a doubt. Without a doubt.
Correct me if I'm wrong, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong. Regardless of DEI, don't we already have things in our Constitution that protect people's rights, protects people?
No.
We don't?
No.
Do we or do we not?
No, we do not. Tell me what protects people from discrimination in housing and in work, in hiring, or getting loans. It's all statutes. It's all statutes. And in these government agencies, there was nothing except for that order. That's why Trump just rescinded it.
So I think what he's talking about is a civil rights bill, basically, that protected civil rights of people, anti-discrimination. And actually, there are 3 bills that protect civil rights. And he rescinded one of them. And the one that he rescinded was taken for granted. Everybody just assumed that like we would have that forever. Like, why would anybody rescind that? And it was the only one that he could actually rescind because it was the only one that was in executive order, to my knowledge. But we have a Civil Rights Act that was passed, I believe. Civil Rights Act of 1964 prohibits discrimination based on race, color, religion, sex, national origin, or in employment, public accommodations, and federally funded programs. And that one is not something that can just be undone with the stroke of a pen. So we have multiple protections in place for that kind of thing. Not to mention the Supreme Court precedent. There is a lot of Supreme Court precedent protecting civil rights and things like that. So there are things in place to protect people and their civil rights. However, why would Trump erase it? What's the point? Why would he do that? I don't understand. Do we respect civil rights? Do we want civil rights? I would like to think that people should want civil rights, that we would want to protect them, right? I don't understand why we're going down this road if not to erase civil rights. What other purpose is there?
I'm gonna tap out because I think someone else has a better can defend that point specifically.
Reed, I have no fucking clue what I'm talking about, and I feel like I've just lost the debate, so I'm done. Good job. At least he's honest, right?